Hey guys, tonight we're going to step into the robust, often mud-splattered shoes of a figure who was absolutely central to Viking society, yet whose stories are often overshadowed by the exploits of her warrior counterparts. We're talking about what it was like to be a Viking wife. Forget any romanticized notions of delicate maidens awaiting their heroes. Your life was one of relentless hard labor, immense responsibility, and a quiet, unyielding strength that kept the entire Viking world running. Imagine a reality where your home was also your workplace, your children, your constant companions, and your ability to manage everything meant the difference between survival and starvation for your entire family. You're about to discover the sheer grit and pervasive demands of life as a Viking wife. And trust me, you probably won't survive this demanding role with your sanity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey began not with a formal education or a leisurely adolescence, but with a rapid, hands-on immersion into the demands of your future role. From the moment you were old enough to grasp a small tool or stir a pot, your early life was a continuous training ground for household and farm duties. You, as a young girl in the Viking Age, weren't shielded from the harsh realities of existence. You were immediately integrated into the ceaseless work that kept your family, your oikos, alive. Imagine your days. There's no formal schoolhouse. Your teachers are your mother, your aunts, and the older women of your longhouse. You learn by constant observation, by imitation, and by immediate participation. Your first tasks might be simple, but crucial: fetching water from the well or nearby stream, a heavy and often cold chore, gathering firewood, a continuous necessity for the smoky hearth, or assisting with the preparation of simple, nourishing meals. These aren't just chores in the modern sense. They are vital contributions to the family's survival, each one directly impacting warmth, sustenance, and cleanliness. It's like being in a perpetual, unpaid internship for a very demanding, high-stakes, family-run survival enterprise. As you grow, your responsibilities rapidly expand. You become proficient in managing the family's livestock, the chickens, goats, and sheep that provide eggs, milk, and wool. You learn to feed them, to clean their stalls, often located within the longhouse itself, adding to the pervasive odors, and to recognize signs of illness. You participate in the planting and harvesting of tough, hardy grains like barley and oats, understanding the seasonal rhythms that dictate food security. Every skill you acquire is pragmatic, directly linked to keeping your family fed, clothed, and healthy. The longhouse itself is your primary classroom. You learn its layout, its rhythms, and how to navigate its smoky interior. You understand how to manage the limited light from the central hearth, how to keep precious food safe from vermin, and how to maintain a semblance of order in a space shared by multiple generations, and often by animals. You become attuned to the needs of every family member, from the youngest infant to the oldest elder, constantly assessing and anticipating. Mainstream historical fact Viking Age girls were trained from a very young age in practical domestic and agricultural skills essential for running a household, including cooking, cleaning, caring for livestock, and preparing for their future roles as wives and mothers. Kate's quirky tidbit. Archaeological finds often reveal small, intricately carved combs, spindles, and miniature tools that might have been used by children, suggesting that even their toys were often functional, preparing them for their adult roles. So, your dollhouse might have actually been a scaled-down longhouse, complete with tiny tools for miniature chores, making playtime a very practical form of vocational training. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the precise age at which children's labor became economically significant in Viking Age households, with some scholars emphasizing the very early onset of demanding tasks, while others suggest a more gradual increase in responsibilities as children matured and acquired proficiency. The exact balance between childhood and productive labor remains a nuanced point of discussion. This early immersion in hard labor, in the constant battle against the elements and scarcity, shapes your character profoundly. You develop immense physical stamina and a resilient, practical mindset. There is little room for frivolous play or idle daydreaming. Every moment is a lesson in efficiency, perseverance, and the unyielding demands of survival. You learn that weakness is a luxury, and that your contribution is not just valued, but absolutely essential for the well-being of your oikos. Your childhood, therefore, is not a period of sheltered innocence. It is a relentless, hands-on apprenticeship that transforms you into a capable, pragmatic young woman, ready to embrace the demanding responsibilities of Viking womanhood. You're forged in the crucible of your northern home, tempered by the cold, by the constant need, and by the relentless pursuit of survival, ensuring you are prepared for the arduous life that awaits you as a Viking wife. It's a boring history for sleep. Perhaps. But it's a chilling insight into a childhood defined by labor, necessity, and the relentless pursuit of survival that shaped every Viking girl. You've just completed your childhood apprenticeship, emerging from a rigorous training in the relentless demands of Viking domesticity. Now, you stand on the cusp of womanhood, ready to embrace your full role in society, a transition almost always marked by marriage, a practical alliance rather than a romantic union. Forget grand declarations of love or personal choice. Your union is a strategic agreement between families, often arranged with an older man, driven by pragmatism, property, and progeny. Imagine the discussions that would take place, not between you and a suitor, but between your father, the bondy head of the household, and the father of your prospective husband. Marriage in the Viking Age was fundamentally an agreement between two families, two kindreds, seeking to strengthen their economic and social ties. It was about creating alliances, consolidating land, and, crucially, ensuring the continuation of the family line through legitimate children. Your personal feelings, while perhaps a bonus if they aligned, were entirely secondary to these larger, more pressing concerns. It's like being a piece on a chessboard, strategically moved to secure a long-term advantage for your family. The choice of your husband would be based on his family's reputation, their wealth in land or livestock. His personal standing: was he a skilled warrior, a good farmer, and his age. It was common for Viking men to marry later, perhaps in their late 20s or 30s, after they had established themselves as capable providers and warriors, or secured their own farmstead. You, as the bride, would typically be much younger, often in your mid to late teens, ready for childbearing and domestic management. This age gap was seen as practical. The husband was established and mature, and the wife was young and fertile, easily integrated into her new household. It's less like choosing a partner and more like being strategically placed in a vital, lifelong role within another family's enterprise. There would be negotiations, primarily concerning the Brudekaup bride price or bride payment, and the Heimfilgia, the bride's personal dowry. The Brudekaup was a payment from the groom's family to the bride's family, compensating them for the loss of a valuable female laborer and cementing the agreement. The Heimfilgia was property you brought with you into the marriage, which remained legally yours, though managed by your husband. This dowry provided you with a degree of financial security and influence within your new home, a subtle point of power in a seemingly unequal arrangement. These were serious economic transactions, far removed from romantic gestures. Mainstream historical fact marriages in the Viking Age were typically arranged alliances between families, focusing on economic, social, and political benefits, often involving a bride price paid by the groom's family and a dowry brought by the bride. Quirky tidbit. While your marriage was primarily an alliance, sagas occasionally hint at cases where a woman might express a strong preference or even defiance regarding a match, often leading to dramatic and sometimes tragic outcomes. This suggests that while arranged marriages were the norm, individual will wasn't entirely absent, though expressing it openly could be risky. Imagine trying to explain to your family that you've got a bad feeling about the arranged marriage, and they just tell you to stop reading too many sagas. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the precise degree of female agency and consent within Viking Age marriage arrangements, with some scholars emphasizing the strong patriarchal framework, while others highlight the informal influence women might have exerted within their families or the importance of the Heimfilgia as a source of female power. The nuance of a woman's voice in these unions remains a point of discussion. The wedding ceremony itself, the bryllup, would be a significant community event, often involving feasting, gift-giving, and ritual acts symbolizing the transfer of the bride from her father's authority to her husband's. It was a public declaration of the new alliance between the two families. For you, the bride, it marked your formal transition from daughter to wife, from one oikos to another, embarking on a new life that was already largely mapped out by tradition and necessity. So, your marriage wasn't a choice born of personal affection or romantic love. It was a strategic, practical alliance, a cornerstone of Viking society designed to secure lineage, property, and communal strength. You were entering a partnership built on duty, not desire, ready to take on the immense responsibilities that came with being the mistress of your own longhouse. It's a boring history for sleep, perhaps, but it's a chilling insight into the pragmatic, often unromantic, foundation of marital life in the Viking Age. You've just been introduced to the practical, often unromantic, realities of your arranged Viking marriage. Now, the wedding ceremony is over, and you find yourself in your new home, your husband's longhouse. This is where your true life as a Viking wife begins, defined by an immense, non-stop responsibility household management, your primary role in running the complex, demanding oikos household that is the very backbone of Viking society. Forget any notions of leisure or being a delicate lady. You are the CEO, CFO, and COO of your domestic universe, often without a board of directors. Imagine your new daily routine. It begins before dawn, often with the first light of the sun creeping through the smoke hole of the longhouse. Your duties are extensive and continuous, encompassing every aspect of survival for your extended family. You are responsible for ensuring there is enough food, enough warmth, enough clothing, and enough order to keep everyone alive and functioning in a harsh environment. It's like managing a 24/7 self-sufficient commune. But everyone is heavily armed and prone to complaining about the quality of the smoked fish. Your first priority is usually the preparation of food. This isn't just about cooking a meal, it's about overseeing the entire food chain. You'd manage the stored provisions, the dried fish, salted meats, grains, and preserved vegetables, meticulously rationing them, especially during the long, lean winters. You'd oversee the grinding of grain into flour, the baking of bread, and the simmering of stews over the central hearth. You'd also be responsible for the care of the kitchen utensils, the clay pots, and the wooden bowls, ensuring they are clean and functional. Beyond the immediate meals, you're in charge of food preservation. This is a vital skill. You'd oversee the drying of fish, the salting of meat, and the fermentation of milk into cheese or skyr. In a world without refrigeration, knowing how to make food last through months of scarcity was critical, and your expertise directly correlated with your family's chances of surviving the winter. It's a lot like being a master chef who's also a brilliant food chemist and a strict inventory manager, all at the same time. Mainstream historical fact: Viking wives were the central managers of the household oikos, responsible for all aspects of domestic life, including food preparation, preservation, and the overall economic functioning of the farmstead, making their role indispensable for survival. Here's a quirky tidbit. The hearth in the center of the longhouse was the heart of your domain. It provided warmth, light, and served as the cooking area. It also, however, filled the longhouse with smoke, which likely caused chronic respiratory issues for those, like you, who spent most of their time indoors. So, while you were the master of fire, you were also probably constantly coughing. Open scholarly debate phrase. Historians still argue about the precise degree of actual decision-making power that Viking wives held within the oikos, with some scholars emphasizing their practical autonomy in daily management, while others highlight the ultimate legal authority of the male Bondi head of household. The nuance of female authority in domestic affairs remains a point of discussion. You also supervise the cleaning and maintenance of the longhouse itself. This is no small feat. With multiple family members, often thralls' slaves, and sometimes livestock living under one roof, cleanliness was a constant battle against dirt, smoke, and animal waste. You'd ensure bedding was aired, floors swept, and water replenished. Your efforts directly impacted the health and comfort of everyone living within your walls. Furthermore, you were the primary caregiver for the children and often for the elderly or infirm. You oversee the early childhood education, teaching practical skills and instilling Viking values. You nurse the sick, applying what rudimentary herbal remedies and folk medicine you know. Your hands are rarely idle, your mind constantly engaged in the myriad tasks necessary to keep your household running smoothly, efficiently, and, above all, alive. So, your role as a Viking wife is not one of gentle domesticity, but of immense, ceaseless responsibility. You are the beating heart of the household, the central pillar upon which your family's survival depends. Your management skills are not just appreciated, they are vital, ensuring that when your husband returns from his voyages, he finds a thriving, functioning home, not a starving, chaotic ruin. It's a boring history for sleep, perhaps, but it's a chilling insight into the profound, unacknowledged labor that was the very foundation of Viking society. You've just been plunged into the relentless reality of household management, realizing your home is a bustling, demanding enterprise that never truly sleeps. Now, let's focus on one of the most time-consuming, physically demanding, and utterly essential tasks that dominated your life as a Viking wife: textile production, an endless labor of spinning and weaving essential cloth. Forget ready-made clothing or quick trips to the fabric store. Every single thread, every piece of fabric for your family's clothes, blankets, and even ship sails was made by your own hands or those you supervised. It's like being the head of a major textile factory. But your factory is your living room. Your machines are rudimentary, and your workforce consists of your daughters and perhaps a few thralls. Imagine the sheer scale of the work. First, there's the raw material. If your family raised sheep, you'd be involved in the shearing. Then, the messy, arduous process of cleaning the wool, removing dirt, burrs, and grease. This is followed by carding, disentangling and straightening the fibers to prepare them for spinning. It's a continuous, dusty, and often smelly task, ensuring you have a steady supply of prepared wool. Then comes the spinning. You would sit for hours, day after day, twirling a spindle and distaff, drawing out the fibers into long, continuous threads. This wasn't a quick mechanical process. It required immense dexterity, patience, and a repetitive motion that could make your fingers ache and your back stiff. The quality of your thread directly impacted the quality of the final cloth. Too thick, too thin, too uneven, and the weaving would suffer. This was a silent, monotonous labor, often performed in the dim light of the longhouse, the constant hum of the spindle filling the quiet hours. You're basically a human thread-making machine, but with much more potential for carpal tunnel syndrome. Once you had accumulated enough spun thread, the weaving would begin. You would work at a vertical loom, a large wooden frame that often stood prominently in the longhouse. This involved setting up the warp threads, a meticulous and time-consuming process, and then painstakingly passing the weft threads back and forth, using a shuttle. Each row had to be carefully beaten down with a heavy loom weight, ensuring a tight, durable fabric. Imagine the rhythmic thud of the loom weights, the tension in the threads, the endless repetition of your hands moving back and forth, hour after hour, day after day. Mainstream historical fact: textile production, especially spinning and weaving wool, was an extremely time-consuming and vital domestic industry in the Viking Age, primarily performed by women to produce clothing, blankets, and other essential fabrics for the household and for trade. Here's a quirky tidbit. The heavy loom weights used on vertical looms were often made of clay or stone, and vast numbers of these have been found at archaeological sites, literally weighing down the evidence of how central weaving was to every Viking household. So, your house probably had more specialized pottery for weaving than for eating, a testament to where the real labor happened. Open scholarly debate phrase. Historians still argue about the precise division of labor in textile production within Viking Age households, with some scholars suggesting a more communal or even specialized approach for certain high-quality textiles, while others emphasize the universal expectation for all women to engage in extensive spinning and weaving for their own families. The scale of individual versus collective textile production remains a nuanced point of discussion. The production of cloth wasn't just for your family's immediate needs. High-quality textiles could also be a valuable item for trade, used to acquire other goods that your farm couldn't produce. This meant your weaving skills directly contributed to the economic prosperity, and perhaps even the social standing, of your household. Your hands, perpetually busy with fiber, were also producing wealth. The demands of textile production were relentless. Clothing wore out, blankets needed replacing, and new sails might be required for your husband's next voyage. There was no finished project, only the continuous cycle of wool preparation, spinning, and weaving, often in addition to all your other household and childcare duties. This continuous, arduous labor was a defining feature of your life as a Viking wife, shaping your hands, your back, and your very existence into a testament to unyielding industry. It's a boring history for sleep, perhaps, but it's a chilling insight into the profound, unacknowledged physical and mental toll of a life defined by the endless creation of thread and cloth. You've just wrapped your mind around the relentless, back-breaking labor of textile production, a task that permeated nearly every waking moment of a Viking wife's life. But your duties certainly didn't stop there. Another critical, daily, and often deeply anxious responsibility was food preparation and preservation. Forget convenient supermarkets and refrigerators. You were literally responsible for feeding everyone, especially through the brutal, lean months of the harsh northern winters, ensuring your entire household's survival. It's like being the head chef, nutritionist, and chief food scientist for a very large, very hungry family, knowing that any mistake could mean starvation. Imagine the sheer scale of the task. Your day begins with the immediate need to prepare meals. This involves more than just cooking. You'd oversee the grinding of grain into flour, a physically demanding process often done with a heavy stone quern. Then, the kneading of dough for bread or flatbreads, cooked over the central hearth. You'd tend to simmering stews made from whatever was available dried or salted meat, fish, root vegetables, and wild herbs. The air in the longhouse would often be thick with the smell of wood smoke and cooking food, a constant reminder of the warmth and sustenance you were providing. But the daily meals were only part of the challenge. Your true test came with food preservation. In a world without refrigeration, mastering techniques to make food last through the long, barren winters was absolutely vital. You would meticulously oversee the drying of fish, often on outdoor racks, to remove moisture and prevent spoilage. Meat would be salted, smoked, or sometimes even fermented to ensure it lasted for months. Vegetables like root crops might be stored in cool, dark pits, while berries could be dried or packed in honey. This wasn't just a chore, it was a sophisticated, crucial science, passed down through generations, and your expertise directly determined whether your family would endure the cold and scarcity. It's a lot like being a highly skilled chemist, but your laboratory is your smoky kitchen, and your experiments are the difference between life and death. You're constantly assessing supplies, making difficult rationing decisions, especially as winter dragged on. Every piece of dried jerky, every handful of preserved grain, every last root vegetable was counted and carefully allocated. You'd watch the stores dwindle, a constant, low-level anxiety gnawing at you. The specter of hunger was never far, a pervasive dread that motivated your every action. You learned to make do with little, to stretch provisions, and to never waste a single scrap. Mainstream historical fact. Viking wives held primary responsibility for food management, including daily preparation and extensive preservation techniques like drying, salting, and smoking, which were crucial for ensuring the household's survival, especially during the long, harsh Scandinavian winters. Quirky tidbit. While modern archaeological finds often emphasize meat and fish bones, evidence also points to the widespread consumption of wild plants, berries, and even seaweed. which women would forage and incorporate into the diet to supplement more conventional food sources, showcasing their deep knowledge of the local environment. So, you might be serving up a hearty stew, only it contained some surprisingly bitter, yet nutritious, local flora that you personally hunted down. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the precise dietary composition of various Viking Age households and the impact of regional differences in food availability, with some scholars emphasizing a greater reliance on plant-based foods than often portrayed, while others highlight the status associated with meat consumption. The true diversity and nutritional adequacy of the Viking diet remain a nuanced point of discussion. The work was physically demanding. Grinding grain by hand for hours was exhausting. Preparing large quantities of fish or meat for preservation took immense effort. You were constantly on your feet, bending, lifting, and toiling. The heat from the hearth could be intense, the smoke irritating, and the odors strong. And this was all in addition to caring for children, managing thralls, and all your other household duties. Your ability to effectively manage food meant the difference between a thriving household and one that succumbed to starvation or illness. Your knowledge, your foresight, and your ceaseless labor were the very foundation of your family's well-being. When your husband returned from a raid, his primary concern would be to find a well-fed household. And that was thanks entirely to your meticulous, exhausting efforts. It's a boring history for sleep, perhaps, but it's a chilling insight into the profound, unglamorous, and absolutely vital role of the Viking wife as the ultimate provider of sustenance in an unforgiving world. You've just completed another grueling day of food preparation and preservation, ensuring your family's sustenance through the lean months. But as a Viking wife, your responsibilities extend far beyond the larder and the hearth, another of your most critical and often terrifying duties is motherhood, a role fraught with high stakes. Childbearing is vital for the continuation of your family line and the strength of your community. But the mortality rates for both you and your baby are horrifyingly high, making every pregnancy a desperate gamble and every birth a perilous ordeal. Imagine yourself pregnant. There are no prenatal checkups, no ultrasound scans, no modern medical advice. Your body aches from constant labor. Your diet might be lacking essential nutrients, and the longhouse environment is filled with smoke and potential pathogens. You continue your arduous duties for as long as possible, spinning, weaving, and tending to the household, even as your body grows heavy and tired. Pregnancy is not a time for rest. It's a period of continued strain, accompanied by a constant low-level anxiety about the health of your unborn child and your own survival. It's like navigating a very intense physical challenge, but you're also building a tiny human inside you. And the finish line is a perilous, unpredictable event. When the time for birth arrives, you will likely be attended by experienced older women from your family or community, perhaps a local wise woman or midwife. This is not a sterile hospital environment. Birth takes place in the longhouse, in a space that is clean by Viking standards, but still far from hygienic. You will endure agonizing labor, often for many hours, with no pain relief beyond perhaps some herbal remedies or a swig of strong ale. The pain is immense, primal, and unavoidable. You push, you strain, you battle, not just for your child's life, but for your own. The infant mortality rate in the Viking Age was tragically high. For your newborn, the first few days and weeks are a critical test. Infections could set in quickly. Breathing difficulties could prove fatal. And even a simple feeding issue could mean a rapid decline. You hold your tiny, vulnerable child close, nursing them, keeping them warm, hoping they have the innate strength to survive a world designed to cull the weak. Every fever, every cough, every unsettled cry would fill you with dread. A silent battle waged over your child's fragile life. Mainstream historical fact motherhood in the Viking Age was a central and highly valued role for women. But both maternal and infant mortality rates were exceptionally high due to the demanding physical conditions of life, lack of advanced medical care, and prevalence of disease. Quirky tidbit. While specific rituals varied, naming ceremonies for infants often occurred only after the child had survived for a few days or weeks, symbolizing their acceptance into the family and community once their initial viability was established. So, you might wait to give your baby a name until you were reasonably sure they would live. A stark and pragmatic approach to early parenthood. Imagine feeling like you have to audition your newborn for their own existence. Open scholarly debate historians still argue about the precise causes of maternal mortality in the Viking Age, with some scholars emphasizing complications from childbirth itself, hemorrhage, infection, while others highlight the cumulative effects of malnutrition and demanding labor on women's health throughout their reproductive lives. The multifactorial nature of maternal death remains a nuanced point of discussion. For you, the mother, the risks are equally dire. Childbirth itself was a leading cause of death for women in the ancient and medieval worlds. Complications such as hemorrhage, infection, or prolonged. Difficult labor could prove fatal. Even if you survived the birth, you were often left physically exhausted, vulnerable to postnatal infections, and facing the immediate demands of caring for a newborn in harsh conditions. Your body, already accustomed to constant labor, would be pushed to its absolute limits, recovering slowly, if at all, and the grief, when a child did not survive, was immense. You would witness the loss of infants, toddlers, or even older children to disease or accident with a frequency that would shatter modern sensibilities. You would prepare their small bodies for burial, often without elaborate ceremony, and endure your sorrow with Viking stoicism, knowing that life and the need for more children to secure the family line had to continue. So, motherhood for a Viking wife was not just about nurturing life. It was a relentless, high-stakes battle against death. Every pregnancy was a risk, every birth a struggle, and every child a precious, vulnerable gamble against the relentless forces of disease, cold, and scarcity. It's a boring history for sleep, perhaps, but it's a chilling insight into the profound physical and emotional toll of a life defined by the desperate, continuous effort to bring and keep new life in the unforgiving Viking Age. You've just borne the immense physical and emotional burden of motherhood in the Viking Age, battling the terrifying odds of maternal and infant mortality. Now, let's turn our attention to another defining, and often solitary, aspect of your life as a Viking wife, the pervasive reality of your husbands as absent raiders. Forget the notion of a constant companion or a steady presence at your side. Your husband was frequently away, sometimes for months or even years, leaving you solely and utterly in charge of the entire household and farmstead. It's like being the CEO of a multi-million-dollar enterprise, but your business partner is constantly off on very dangerous, very long business trips with no set return date. Imagine the spring. The ice begins to melt. The seas become navigable, and a familiar buzz fills the air as the longships are prepared. Your husband, along with the other men of the community, prepares to set sail for distant lands, either for raiding, trading, or exploring. You help him prepare his provisions, mend his clothing, and perhaps offer a quiet prayer to the gods for his safe return. This departure isn't a temporary absence. It's a profound shift in the household dynamics. Suddenly, the male protective and providing presence is gone, and the entire weight of the oikos falls squarely onto your shoulders. You are left in charge of everything: the children, the elderly, the thralls' slaves, the livestock, the farm fields, the longhouse itself, all become your direct responsibility. You continue to manage the food provisions, rationing them carefully, knowing that no new supplies will come from outside your control until your husband's return, if he returns. You oversee the daily maintenance of the farm, ensuring the fields are planted, the animals tended, and any repairs are made. Your decision-making authority becomes absolute within the domestic sphere. It's like being the acting mayor, police chief, and head of the entire agricultural sector for a small town, all by yourself. The waiting is perhaps the hardest part. There are no letters, no telegrams, no ways to know where your husband is, what dangers he faces, or if he is even still alive. You live with a constant, low-level anxiety, punctuated by moments of acute dread if rumors of a storm or a distant battle reach your ears. Every ship that appears on the horizon could be his, or it could be a different longship, bringing news of disaster or worse, new raiders to your own shores. You are resilient, stoic even, but the emotional toll of this perpetual uncertainty is immense. Mainstream historical fact. Viking-age husbands were frequently absent from their homes for extended periods, undertaking raiding, trading, or exploratory voyages, leaving their wives with significant and often sole responsibility for managing the household, farm, and family. Quirky tidbit. Archaeological evidence, like the richly furnished Oseberg ship burial, suggests that some wealthy Viking women were highly respected and held significant authority, perhaps even acting as chieftains or influential figures in their husband's absence, indicating a remarkable level of female leadership within the domestic and sometimes even broader community sphere. So, you might not just be running the farm. You might be calling the shots for your entire village, making diplomatic decisions, and maybe even commissioning the next longship. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the precise degree of legal and de facto power Viking wives held during their husbands' absences, with some scholars emphasizing their extensive practical authority and decision-making capabilities within the oikos, while others highlight that ultimate legal and political authority generally remained with the male Bondi head of household upon his return. The exact boundaries of their autonomy remain a nuanced point of discussion. Your social life during these periods largely revolves around other women, their husbands also absent. You form close bonds of mutual support, sharing advice, helping with tasks, and offering comfort in times of hardship. These networks are vital, a collective resilience against the challenges of a male-absent world. You might also interact with traders who arrive at your settlement, negotiating prices for your goods, adding to your economic acumen. When your husband finally returns, if he does, there's immense relief, but also a shift in dynamic. He reasserts his authority as Bondi, and you resume your vital, but perhaps less overt role as his partner in managing the oikos. The stories he brings from distant lands are vital, enriching your knowledge of the wider world, but they also underscore the dangerous, adventurous life he leads, a life you can only indirectly participate in. So, your life as a Viking wife is often a solitary vigil, a testament to your immense strength, self-reliance, and unwavering dedication. You are the steadfast anchor of the household, the one who keeps the flame burning, the larder stocked, and the children safe while the men seek glory or wealth on distant shores. It's a boring history for sleep. Perhaps, but it's a chilling insight into the profound, unacknowledged strength required to manage an entire Viking world, often completely on your own. You've just shouldered the immense responsibility of managing your entire household during your husband's prolonged absences, proving yourself the bedrock of your family's survival. This leads us to another critical aspect of your life. As a Viking wife, your economic contributions beyond the home. Forget the idea that your work ended at the longhouse door. You actively managed trade, oversaw farming, and contributed directly to the wealth and prosperity of your oikos, extending your influence far beyond the domestic sphere. It's like being a highly capable entrepreneur and business manager, but your office is also your kitchen, and your quarterly reports are literally about how many sheep you kept alive. Imagine the spring, when the fields needed plowing and planting. While your husband might have been present for some of this, if he was home, much of the daily oversight of the farm fell to you. You'd direct the thralls, if you had them, or your older children, deciding which crops to plant in the limited arable land, ensuring the plowing was done, and overseeing the sowing of barley, oats, or flax. Your knowledge of the land, the weather, and optimal planting times was crucial for a successful harvest, which directly translated into food for the winter. Your livestock were also your direct responsibility. You managed the cows, sheep, goats, and pigs, ensuring they were fed, healthy, and protected from predators or disease. This meant daily milking, shearing wool, and overseeing the breeding cycles. The products from these animals, milk, cheese, wool, hides, and eventually meat, were vital for your family's sustenance and for trade. You might even be involved in the tanning of hides or the processing of wool into valuable yarn, adding further value to your raw materials. It's like being a rancher, a veterinarian, and a textile manufacturer all rolled into one, without the benefit of a stable full of employees. Beyond direct production, you were often involved in trade. While your husband might embark on long-distance trading voyages, you were likely responsible for local commerce. You might take your surplus textiles, cheese, butter, or dried fish to a local market, or exchange them with neighboring families or traveling merchants. Your sharp bargaining skills, your knowledge of quality, and your ability to manage transactions were vital for acquiring goods your household couldn't produce, such as tools, salt, or exotic luxuries obtained through your husband's distant ventures. You were, in essence, the household's chief commercial officer, managing its internal economy and external exchanges. Mainstream historical fact: Viking wives had significant economic roles beyond domestic management, including overseeing farm production, livestock, and engaging in local trade, making crucial direct contributions to the wealth and sustenance of their households. Idzek's quirky tidbit. Archaeological evidence, such as spindle whorls and loom weights found in nearly every female burial site, vividly illustrates the immense scale of textile production managed by Viking women. Some of the most valuable luxury goods traded by Vikings were fine textiles, indicating that women's labor literally clothed and enriched their society. So, while your husband was off bringing back silver, you were probably making the incredibly expensive cloth he traded for it, proving that your quiet labor was just as valuable as his loud rating. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the precise extent of women's involvement in broader economic networks and their independent trading activities versus managing household production for their husbands. Some scholars emphasize a more autonomous entrepreneurial role for certain women, while others highlight that most economic activities were ultimately integrated into the male-headed oikos. The nuances of women's economic agency outside the home remain a point of discussion. Your economic contributions also included the management of thralls, if your household had them. These enslaved individuals would perform much of the arduous physical labor on the farm and within the longhouse, but you were responsible for organizing their work, ensuring their productivity, and overseeing their welfare to the extent allowed by the system. This managerial role further cemented your authority within the oikos and directly impacted the household's output. This expansive economic role gave you a degree of practical power and respect that was unusual for women in many other medieval European societies. You were not just a homemaker, you were a vital economic engine, a producer of wealth, and a crucial decision-maker in the face of constant scarcity and danger. Your husband might bring home plunder, but it was your tireless, intelligent management that turned raw resources into sustainable wealth and ensured the ongoing viability of your family. It's a boring history for sleep, perhaps, but it's a chilling insight into the formidable, often unacknowledged, economic power wielded by the Viking wife, the true backbone of the Norse world. You've just realized the immense economic power you wielded as a Viking wife, actively managing your farm and contributing directly to your household's wealth. But even with all your resourcefulness, another pervasive misery constantly stalked your family: disease, a silent killer. Forget modern hospitals, vaccines, or effective medicines. You faced rampant infections, dealt with devastating outbreaks, and possessed only primitive care for your family, making every illness a life or death struggle. It's like being a nurse in a perpetual pandemic, but your toolkit consists solely of hope, a few questionable herbs, and a lot of desperate prayers. Imagine your longhouse. It's a single, often crowded communal space where family members, and sometimes livestock, live in close proximity. Sanitation, as we understand it, is virtually non-existent. Waste accumulates. Fresh water can be scarce or contaminated, and personal hygiene is limited by resources. The air is thick with wood smoke, animal odors, and the constant presence of germs. These conditions are a perfect breeding ground for a myriad of diseases, and your children, with their developing immune systems, are particularly vulnerable. When sickness struck, you, as the wife and mother, were the primary caregiver. You would tend to the feverish, soothe the coughing, and try to ease the pain of the ailing. Your knowledge of medicine would be based on inherited wisdom, passed down through generations of women. You'd know about various medicinal herbs, willow bark for fevers, plantain for wounds, perhaps some local fungi or berries with healing properties. You'd prepare poultices, teas, and balms, hoping they would be enough to fend off the invisible invaders. But often, they weren't. Common illnesses that are minor inconveniences today were terrifying death sentences. Measles, influenza, dysentery. Smallpox, likely introduced through contact with new populations during raids or trade. These could sweep through your community like wildfire. You would witness children growing weak, succumbing rapidly, their small bodies quickly prepared for burial. Adults, too, including your husband or other family members, could be struck down, leaving immense holes in your already stretched household. The grief of repeated loss was a constant companion. Mainstream historical fact: disease, including infectious diseases, parasitic infections, and illnesses stemming from poor sanitation and nutrition, was a leading cause of mortality across all age groups in the Viking Age, with women being primary caregivers using limited and often ineffective medical knowledge. Quirky tidbit: archaeological finds sometimes include tiny amulets or charms made of amber, bone, or metal, perhaps worn by children or adults to ward off sickness. So, alongside your practical herbal remedies, you might also rely on a bit of magical thinking, hoping a small carved piece of bone would frighten away the invisible forces of illness. It's a bit like giving your sick child a lucky charm and hoping for the best, because that's all you have. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the precise impact of specific new diseases introduced through Viking contact with other cultures versus the persistent threat of endemic diseases already present in their environment. The relative contributions of new pathogens versus existing health challenges to Viking Age mortality rates remain a nuanced point of discussion. For you, a pregnant woman or a new mother, the risks were even higher. Childbirth itself was fraught with danger, and postnatal infections were common. A weak immune system due to frequent pregnancies, combined with the unhygienic conditions, made you particularly vulnerable. The sheer physical exhaustion of your daily life further compounded these risks. The helplessness in the face of widespread illness must have been immense. There were no doctors to call, no hospitals to admit the sick, no miracle cures. You relied on your own knowledge, the community's collective experience, and the hope that your family had the strength to fight off the sickness. The silence that fell over a longhouse after an epidemic, punctuated only by the quiet weeping of the survivors, was perhaps more terrifying than the sounds of the sickness itself. So, your life as a Viking wife was a constant battle against the invisible armies of disease. You were the frontline defender of your family's health, armed with only the most rudimentary tools, facing overwhelming odds. Every sniffle, every fever, every ache was a source of profound anxiety, a chilling reminder that death was an ever-present shadow, lurking in every corner of your longhouse. It's a boring history for sleep, perhaps, but it's a chilling insight into the pervasive misery of disease that silently stalked every Viking family, and which you, the wife, fought with relentless, desperate courage. You've just shouldered the immense burden of battling disease, understanding that your home was a constant front line against unseen microscopic enemies. But the threats to your household were not always invisible. Another pervasive and deeply felt misery for you, the Viking wife, was the winter's endless hardship. Forget cozy, festive snowfalls. You battled extreme cold, perpetual scarcity, and profound isolation for months on end, pushing your resilience to its absolute limits. It's like living in a giant, perpetually malfunctioning freezer, where the thermostat is stuck on hypothermia and all the food starts to run out. Imagine the days shortening, the sun becoming a pale, fleeting ghost that barely skims the horizon. Then, the snow begins to fall, blanketing the landscape in a deep, unforgiving white. The sea often freezes or becomes too treacherous for travel, effectively cutting off your community from the wider world. For months, you're confined to your longhouse, a space that, while providing shelter, is also damp, smoky, and relentlessly cold. The drafts seep through every crack and crevice in the timber and turf walls, and the smoke from the central hearth, while offering warmth, irritates your lungs and stings your eyes. The cold is an ever-present, biting force. Your clothing, made of thick wool and animal hides, provides some insulation, but it's rarely enough against the deep, pervasive chill that penetrates every layer. Your hands and feet are perpetually numb, prone to aching and stiffness. The risk of frostbite is constant. A simple misstep during an outdoor chore or a prolonged exposure could mean losing fingers or toes to the merciless bite of the sub-zero temperatures. You're constantly shivering, your body expending vital energy just to maintain warmth, leaving you perpetually tired, even after a full night's sleep. Food scarcity, which we discussed earlier, becomes even more acute during these months. The provisions meticulously stored from the brief summer and autumn harvests, dried fish, salted meats, hardy grains dwindle alarmingly. You are the one who rations them, making agonizing decisions about how to stretch meager supplies, knowing that every single morsel is precious. The threat of outright famine looms largest in these dark months, adding another layer of gnawing anxiety to the endless cold. Your cooking becomes even more about ingenuity and preservation, making something out of almost nothing. Mainstream historical fact: Viking winters were long, extremely cold, and resource scarce, posing significant survival challenges for households, with women bearing primary responsibility for managing dwindling food supplies, maintaining warmth, and overseeing domestic life under harsh conditions. Quirky tidbit: to manage the pervasive smoke from the central hearth in the longhouse. Viking Age dwellings often featured a combination of roof vents and low doors, designed to create a draft that pulled smoke upwards and outwards. However, this also meant that the longhouse was often quite drafty and chilly at floor level, making it a constant battle to stay warm. So, while your roof might have been cleverly designed, your feet were probably always freezing. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the precise impact of extended periods of extreme cold or mini ice ages on Viking Age societal adaptations and migration patterns, with some scholars suggesting it directly pressured communities to seek new, warmer lands, while others emphasize the inherent resilience and resourcefulness of Norse populations in adapting to their environment. The role of climate in shaping Viking activity remains a nuanced point of discussion. The isolation of winter also takes a profound mental and social toll. Travel becomes difficult, limiting contact with neighboring families or other communities. You're confined to your longhouse, seeing the same faces day in and day out. The vast, empty, frozen landscape outside feels oppressive, a silent, menacing presence that reinforces your vulnerability and helplessness against nature's raw power. There's no easy escape, no quick flight to warmer climes. You simply endure, waiting for the brief, precious return of the sun and the melting of the ice, knowing that even then, true warmth and abundance are fleeting. Sleep is often fitful and shallow, even huddled close to others for communal warmth. The persistent cold seeps in, making true relaxation elusive. The lack of natural light disrupts your circadian rhythm, contributing to chronic fatigue and a pervasive sense of malaise. You might dream of sunlight, of green leaves, of warmth, but awaken to the same relentless darkness and biting chill, day after day. So, while the image of a Viking warrior might evoke daring raids, the daily reality for many months of your year as a Viking wife was a relentless, grinding struggle against the elements. The cold was an enemy as formidable as any shield wall, and its victory meant frostbitten limbs, failing strength, and a slow, agonizing slide into oblivion for your household. It's a boring history for sleep, perhaps, but it's a chilling insight into the fundamental, pervasive misery of winter that shaped every moment of a Viking wife's existence. You've just endured the endless, chilling misery of a Viking winter, a relentless battle against cold and scarcity. But despite the grinding hardship and the patriarchal societal structure, another fascinating and often surprising aspect of your life as a Viking wife emerges: your legal rights, which offered surprising autonomy compared to women in many other medieval European societies. Forget being a mere chattel. You held unusual legal powers, like the ability to initiate divorce, claim your dowry, and manage property, offering you a unique position of influence. It's like being a warrior in a world of peasants. But your weapon is a legal parchment. Imagine a dispute arising in your longhouse, perhaps with a thrall, or even with your husband. You wouldn't be entirely powerless or without recourse. While your husband, the Bondi head of household, held ultimate authority, you possessed certain enshrined legal rights that offered protection and a degree of agency. These rights were rooted in the Norse legal codes, such as the Icelandic Gragas, which, while later written down, reflected much older customs. Perhaps one of the most remarkable rights you held was the ability to initiate divorce. If your husband failed to provide adequately for the household, committed acts of abuse, or was away for too long without support, you could, under certain circumstances, legally separate from him. The process involved formally declaring your intention in front of witnesses, stating your reasons. This was a significant power, unheard of for women in many other contemporary European cultures where divorce was often only possible for men, or required complex church annulments. It's like having an eject button on your marriage, and surprisingly, you're allowed to push it. Crucially, upon divorce, you were legally entitled to reclaim your heimfylgja, the personal dowry you brought into the marriage, and often a share of the marital property acquired during the union. This provided you with an economic safety net, preventing you from becoming destitute upon separation. This right to your own property and its return underscored your independent economic standing within the marriage. You weren't simply merged into your husband's assets. You retained a distinct financial identity. Mainstream historical fact: Viking women possessed relatively extensive legal rights compared to women in many contemporary European societies, including the ability to own property, inherit, initiate divorce, and reclaim their dowry upon separation. Quirky tidbit: in some sagas, there are instances where a woman, if she felt gravely wronged, could even publicly declare a divorce by stating her intention at the front door of the house and then again at her bed. Imagine ending your marriage by loudly announcing it to the entire street and then to your marital bed. A very public, very direct way to say, "We're done." Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the precise frequency with which women exercised their right to initiate divorce and the social consequences they faced for doing so. Some scholars emphasize the practical limitations and potential social stigma, while others highlight the very existence of such legal recourse as a significant indicator of female autonomy. The practical implications of these legal rights remain a nuanced point of discussion. Beyond divorce, you also had the right to own and inherit property. This meant that you could inherit land, precious goods, and even ships from your parents or other relatives. This was a vital source of wealth and influence, making you a significant economic player within your community. While your husband managed your property during the marriage, it legally remained yours, and you could pass it on to your own heirs. This contrasted sharply with, for example, many parts of feudal Europe, where women's property often reverted to male control upon marriage. You also held the keys to the household, literally and symbolically. The keys to the longhouse were a symbol of your authority as mistress, worn on your belt. This represented your control over the household's provisions, its valuable textiles, and its daily operations. While not a written legal right, It was a universally recognized symbol of your practical power and indispensable role. These legal rights, combined with your immense responsibilities in household and economic management, especially during your husband's absences, meant that you were far from a meek, subservient figure. You were a strong, independent woman within the framework of your society, capable of defending your interests and wielding considerable influence. Your life was brutal, yes, but it was also empowered in ways that might surprise modern observers, a testament to the complex and often contradictory nature of Viking society. It's a boring history for sleep, perhaps, but it's a chilling insight into the surprising strength and agency woven into the challenging life of a Viking wife. You've just considered the surprising extent of your legal rights as a Viking wife, revealing a level of autonomy unusual for the medieval period. But despite your immense domestic responsibilities and legal standing, your personal life wasn't about leisurely social gatherings or independent friendships. Your social life and networks revolved tightly around other women and community events, forming vital bonds of support in a world where male and female spheres were often distinct. It's like living in a tightly knit sorority. But the main activities are incredibly intense group chores and supporting each other through actual famines. Imagine your days within the longhouse. Your primary companions are your daughters, your mother if she lives with you, your thralls if you have them, and perhaps other female relatives living within your extended oikos. This creates an almost exclusively female sphere for much of your daily interaction. You work together, share knowledge, tell stories, and support each other through the relentless demands of household management, textile production, and childcare. These bonds of female kinship and shared labor are incredibly strong, forged in the crucible of common hardship. Your social interactions beyond the immediate household would largely occur at communal gatherings, religious festivals, seasonal feasts, and perhaps local markets would be opportunities to meet with other women from neighboring farmsteads. These events were not frivolous outings. They were crucial for maintaining community ties, exchanging news, and solidifying social relationships. You would share information about harvests, discuss remedies for illness, or perhaps arrange matches for your children. It's like an ancient networking event, but everyone is wearing wool and discussing the merits of different types of smoked fish, while men had their own distinct social spaces, like the Thing assemblies for legal and political matters, or the symposium, though less formalized in Scandinavia than Greece for feasting and storytelling. Women had their own gatherings, often centered around shared labor. Imagine women working together on large weaving projects, or gathering to process a particularly large catch of fish, exchanging stories and gossip as their hands worked tirelessly. These shared tasks were as much social events as they were economic necessities, fostering deep camaraderie. Mainstream historical fact. Viking women's social lives were often centered around female kin and community-based activities within the household and local settlement, fostering strong networks of support and shared knowledge, distinct from male social spheres. Quirky tidbit. Archaeological finds of communal cooking pits and large feasting halls suggest that women played a central role in organizing and executing large-scale feasts and religious celebrations, which were vital for social cohesion and displaying wealth. So, while the men might boast about their battles, you were probably the one making sure everyone was fed, bathed, and had a decent place to sit at the victory feast. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the extent to which women's social networks might have influenced broader political or economic decisions, especially during their husbands' absences. Some scholars suggest an indirect but significant influence through their male kin. while others maintain that their impact remained largely confined to the domestic sphere. The informal power of female social ties remains a nuanced point of discussion. These female networks were a vital support system. When a husband was away on a raid, or if sickness struck, you could rely on the practical help and emotional solace of other women. They understood the unique challenges of your life, sharing knowledge about childcare, herbal remedies, and managing the household in times of scarcity. In a world without formal institutions of support, these informal bonds were your most reliable safety net. While your husband might bring back exotic tales from distant lands, your world, socially, was often more localized. You were deeply embedded in the daily rhythms of your community, sharing joys and sorrows with the women around you. Your social identity was tied to your role within this female sphere, a powerful and indispensable part of the Viking collective. You learned to rely on your sisters, your mothers, and your daughters, forging bonds that were as strong and enduring as the longhouse timbers themselves. So, your social life as a Viking wife was not about casual acquaintances or independent pursuits. It was a dense, intricate web of female connections, forged through shared labor, mutual support, and the common understanding of a demanding existence. This robust social fabric, often unseen by the outside world, was as crucial to the survival of Viking society as any warrior's axe. It's a boring history for sleep, perhaps, but it's a chilling insight into the profound, unacknowledged strength and solidarity found within the female networks of the Viking Age. You've just navigated the intricate web of your female social networks, recognizing their vital role in your daily life as a Viking wife. Now, let's confront a grim and pervasive reality that was deeply woven into the fabric of your household slavery, a domestic reality. Forget the clean, romanticized image of Viking life. You constantly managed thralls' slaves, a common but harsh aspect of your home, revealing a brutal economic and social hierarchy that directly impacted your daily responsibilities and underscored your own position of authority. It's like being a manager in a company where a significant portion of your workforce has been acquired through literal human trafficking. Imagine your household. If your family had any wealth, it likely included thralls. These individuals, often captured during raids, or sometimes born into servitude, were the lowest class in Viking society, possessing no rights or freedoms. They performed the most arduous and undesirable labor, both on the farm and within the longhouse. You, as the wife and mistress of the oikos, were directly responsible for managing their work, ensuring their productivity, and overseeing their daily lives. This meant directing their chores, the heaviest field work, hauling water and firewood, grinding grain, cleaning out animal stalls, and any other physically demanding or unpleasant task. You would be responsible for allocating their meager food rations, overseeing their shelter, often a less comfortable part of the longhouse, or separate, simpler dwellings, and ensuring they remained subservient. Your authority over them was absolute, enforced by the law and the threat of severe punishment. It's like being in charge of a permanent, involuntary chain gang, and their labor directly benefits your family's survival. The presence of thralls in your household highlighted the profound social inequalities of Viking society, while you, as a free Viking wife, had significant responsibilities and a degree of autonomy. Your comfort and ability to focus on managerial tasks were often directly dependent on the coerced labor of others. Their subjugation freed you and your children from the most grueling forms of toil, allowing your family to accumulate more wealth and maintain a higher social standing. Their misery was, in a very real sense, the foundation of your household's prosperity. Mainstream historical fact. Slavery thraldom was an integral part of Viking Age society and economy, with thralls slaves performing much of the heavy labor in households and on farms, and Viking wives often held direct managerial authority over them. Quirky tidbit thralls could sometimes be released from bondage, a process known as manumission. While rare, a thrall might earn enough money to buy their freedom, or be freed by a benevolent master, and their descendants could eventually become free members of society. So, while a brutal reality, there was a faint, distant glimmer of hope for some to escape their servitude, making your managerial decisions potentially life-altering for them. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the precise economic scale and moral perceptions of slavery in Viking Age society, with some scholars emphasizing its widespread and crucial role in the economy, while others highlight the variations in treatment across regions and periods, and the limited evidence for systemic cruelty compared to other slaveholding societies. The nuances of thraldom as a socio-economic institution remain a point of discussion. The acquisition of thralls was often through raids. Your husband, or other men from your community, would capture individuals from foreign lands, bringing them back to be sold or directly incorporated into households. You might witness their arrival, disoriented and terrified, thrust into a completely alien world. This was a grim reminder of the brutal realities of Viking expansion and the human cost of plunder. Managing thralls also presented its own set of challenges and anxieties. You had to ensure their obedience, prevent escapes, and maintain order among them. While they were a valuable labor force, they were also resentful, potentially rebellious, and required constant oversight. This added another layer of responsibility to your already demanding life, requiring vigilance and a firm hand. So, your daily life as a Viking wife, while imbued with considerable authority, was also deeply entangled with the harsh realities of slavery. You managed human beings as property, their forced labor enabling your own household's survival and prosperity. It's a boring history for sleep, perhaps, but it's a chilling insight into the profound moral complexities and the brutal economic foundations that underscored the domestic life of a Viking wife, reminding you that power and comfort often came at a terrible, unacknowledged price. You've just navigated the complex, often grim, reality of managing thralls, a stark reminder of the social hierarchies and brutal economics underpinning your Viking household. Now, let's shift our focus to another fundamental aspect of your daily life as a Viking wife, your religious duties and the pervasive grip of superstition. Forget formal, organized church services. Your spiritual world was deeply interwoven with the rhythms of nature, the whims of unpredictable pagan gods, and a constant fear of malevolent spirits, shaping your rituals and anxieties. It's like living in a world where every weather report is also a divine prophecy, and your household chores double as sacred offerings. Imagine your longhouse, the central hearth, which warms your family and cooks your food, is also a sacred space, a link to your ancestors and the gods. Your religious practices are primarily domestic and personal, centered around the home and the cyclical rhythms of the seasons. There's no priest standing at an altar every Sunday. Instead, you, as the wife and mistress of the oikos, are often the primary practitioner of household rituals, ensuring the well-being and prosperity of your family through proper observance. Your duties would include making small offerings to the gods and spirits for protection and good fortune. You might leave food or drink for the landvetir, the land spirits, to ensure the fertility of your farm and the safety of your animals. You might pour a libation, a ritual offering of liquid to the house spirits, the husvetir, seeking their blessing and warding off misfortune. These are daily, intimate acts of piety, woven seamlessly into your routine, driven by a deep-seated belief that these invisible forces directly influenced your harvest, your health, and your family's safety. It's like having a very specific, very demanding set of spiritual chores that, if neglected, could lead to actual disaster. The world around you is alive with unseen forces. The rustle of leaves could be the whisper of an elf, the sudden chill a sign of a malevolent spirit, a strange dream, a prophetic warning. You live with a pervasive, low-level anxiety, constantly trying to appease the unpredictable gods of the Norse pantheon: Odin, Thor, Freya, Frigg, and avoid offending the myriad of lesser spirits. Your decisions, from planting crops to your husband's departure on a raid, might be influenced by omens, dreams, or the advice of a local seeress vulva. Mainstream historical fact: Viking women played a central role in household religious practices and rituals, maintaining cults of fertility and protection, and were deeply involved in a polytheistic and animistic belief system that permeated daily life and seasonal cycles. Quirky tidbit: archaeological finds, particularly burial mounds, often reveal grave goods like amulets and small figurines that might have been used in domestic rituals or worn for protection. These range from miniature Thor's hammers for warding off evil to fertility symbols. So, your dresser might have been less about makeup and more about a collection of tiny, protective talismans for your family's safety and prosperity. Open scholarly debate historians still argue about the precise theological understanding and daily practice of paganism in the Viking Age, particularly the distinction between formal cults and localized folk beliefs, and the extent to which women held leadership roles within informal religious communities. The specific nuances of female religious authority and practice remain a point of discussion. You would also participate in larger community religious festivals, often tied to seasonal changes like the winter solstice or the spring equinox. These gatherings involved communal sacrifices, feasting, and storytelling, designed to honor the gods and ensure the well-being of the entire community. Your role in preparing for these feasts and your presence at the rituals was vital for the collective spiritual health of your people. The advent of Christianity, brought by traders and missionaries, would introduce another layer of complexity to your religious life. You might hear tales of a new, single God, a different set of rituals. For many generations, both old and new beliefs might coexist, or even intertwine, adding to the spiritual confusion and potential internal conflict. You might find yourself weighing the old ways against the new, wondering which gods truly held sway over your destiny. So, your life as a Viking wife was not just about the tangible tasks of survival. It was also a constant spiritual journey, a dance with the unseen forces of your world. You were a domestic priestess, a guardian of ancestral beliefs, constantly navigating a complex web of divine wills and malevolent spirits, all while ensuring your family's physical well-being. It's a boring history for sleep, perhaps, but it's a chilling insight into the profound, unacknowledged spiritual labor that was a daily reality for every Viking wife. You've just navigated the intricate world of your religious duties and the pervasive grip of Viking superstition. This brings us to the final, unifying truth about being a Viking wife: your extraordinary resilience and your absolutely vital role in society. Forget the focus on male warriors. Your demanding, often unacknowledged impact was the very foundation upon which Viking society, its raids, its trade, and its very existence truly rested. You were the steadfast anchor in a world of constant motion and brutal unpredictability. Imagine looking back on your life. From your earliest days, you were plunged into a childhood of relentless labor and practical training, preparing you for the immense responsibilities ahead. You learned to manage a household that was a complex economic unit, producing food, textiles, and other necessities. You oversaw the farm, the livestock, and, often, the thralls, ensuring productivity even in the face of scarcity and unforgiving winters. Your economic acumen was as crucial as any warrior's plunder, often more so, providing the stability that allowed men to venture forth. It's like being the CEO of a company that manufactures everything, manages all logistics, and handles all HR, while your co-CEO is frequently off on very long, very dangerous business development trips. You carried the profound burden of motherhood, enduring perilous childbirth and raising children in a world of high mortality rates, constantly battling disease and hunger. Your resilience in the face of loss, your unwavering dedication to nurturing new life, was fundamental to the continuation of your family line and the future of your community. You were the silent guardian of the next generation, preparing them for the harsh realities they too would face. Your legal rights, unusual for the medieval period, granted you a surprising degree of autonomy. The ability to initiate divorce, to control your dowry, and to own property meant you were not merely a possession, but a respected individual with a recognized legal standing. This gave you a quiet strength, a personal agency that, while sometimes constrained by societal norms, set you apart and allowed you to protect your interests and those of your children. Mainstream historical fact: Viking wives were indispensable to the functioning and survival of Viking Age society, demonstrating immense resilience, managing complex households and farms, raising children, and holding significant economic and legal authority, making them central figures in their communities. Quirky tidbit: archaeological finds, particularly sets of keys often buried with women, are powerful symbols of the Viking wife's authority and control over the household's provisions and stores. So, you literally held the keys to the kingdom, or at least the longhouse larder, a clear sign of your domestic power. Imagine your power being represented by a giant keyring. Very practical, very Viking. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the extent to which the sagas and archaeological evidence accurately reflect the daily lives and status of all Viking women. Acknowledging that many sources focus on the elite, and that the experiences of women from lower social strata or those taken as thralls would have been vastly different. The representativeness of the available evidence for general female experience remains a nuanced point of discussion. You navigated a spiritual world permeated by pagan gods and superstitions, performing daily rituals to ensure protection and prosperity for your household. You were the keeper of traditions, the one who invoked the ancient powers, adding a spiritual dimension to your already immense responsibilities. This ensured that even in the face of Christianization, the old ways often lingered. Preserved within the domestic sphere, your social life, though focused on other women, formed vital networks of support, sharing knowledge, and collective strength. These female bonds were crucial for emotional resilience and practical assistance, demonstrating a powerful solidarity that sustained communities through periods of male absence and pervasive hardship. So, while the Viking Age is often defined by the roaring longships and the clash of axes, it was your tireless, unyielding labor, your quiet strength, and your formidable resilience that truly held society together. You were the anchor that allowed the ships to sail, the foundation that supported the warriors, the silent engine of the entire Viking world. Your life was brutal, yes, filled with hardship and danger, but it was also a testament to incredible strength, unwavering dedication, and indispensable value. It's a boring history for sleep, perhaps, but it's a profound and chilling insight into the truly heroic, yet often unacknowledged, life of a Viking wife. Now, gently close your eyes. Let the sounds around you soften, just like the echoes of the bustling longhouse and the distant sea begin to fade. Feel the weight of these old stories settle into the quiet corners of your mind. Tonight, you've journeyed through a life of ceaseless labor, immense responsibility, and quiet strength. A world where every sunrise brought new demands and every sunset new anxieties. The hum of the loom, the crackle of the hearth, and the silent strength of a family held together by an unwavering hand now mingle with the soft hum of your fan, carrying you further into comfort. Let the images drift, dissolving into the peaceful quiet that now surrounds you. There's nothing left to do but simply be. Drift. Now, into a deep, peaceful slumber. End of script. Sweet dreams.